Tonight, you'll probably do something your ancestors almost never could. You'll close a door. Maybe you'll sit alone in your bedroom. Maybe you'll scroll through your phone. Maybe you'll put on headphones and disappear into your own private world. And nobody will know what you're doing. Nobody will hear your thoughts. Nobody will interrupt you. To us, that feels normal. In fact, privacy feels so normal that we rarely stop to think about it. But here's a strange question. What if privacy is one of the newest things humans ever invented? What if for almost all of human history, being alone was nearly impossible? Because for over 300,000 years, humans lived in small groups. They hunted together, they ate together, they slept together. And most of the time, they were never truly alone. Not for an hour, not for a day, sometimes not even for a few minutes. The modern idea of personal space, private rooms, private conversations, and private lives may be far stranger than we realize. And before we continue, if you enjoy videos about human history, psychology, and the strange story of our species, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the world your ancestors lived in was very different from the one you know today. And in some ways, it may have been the exact opposite. Imagine waking up 50,000 years ago. Not in a house, not in an apartment, not in a bedroom, but inside a shelter shared with everyone in your group. Parents, children, grandparents, hunters, elders, everyone. The average hunter-gatherer band contained somewhere between 20 and 50 people, and those people spent nearly every waking moment together. Finding food required cooperation. Protection required cooperation. Raising children required cooperation. Being separated from the group wasn't freedom, it was danger. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have found that solitude is surprisingly rare. Even today, among some traditional groups, people spend almost their entire lives within sight or hearing distance of other people. Think about that. Most modern humans spend hours alone every day. Your ancestors often spent entire weeks without experiencing what we would call privacy. And the strange part is that they probably didn't miss it, because you can't miss something that doesn't exist. The idea that a person should have a private space of their own hadn't even been invented yet. But things get even stranger when we look at where people slept. Today, sleeping beside strangers would feel uncomfortable to most people. For ancient humans, it was normal. In hunter-gatherer camps, families often slept close together around fires. Body heat mattered. Safety mattered. Being alone at night meant exposure, predators, weather, enemies, darkness itself. Archaeologists believe many prehistoric shelters contained entire family groups sharing the same sleeping space. And this didn't end when civilization appeared. Thousands of years later, privacy was still rare. Ancient houses were crowded. Multi-generational families often lived together. Servants slept near their masters. Children slept near parents. Guests frequently shared sleeping areas. The idea that every person should have their own bedroom would have sounded absurd for most of human history. Even kings lack the privacy we take for granted today. Which leads to a surprising fact. The most powerful people in history often had less privacy than modern middle-class workers. And that's because power once attracted people constantly. Imagine being a king. Most people picture luxury, freedom, control. But many kings lived under almost constant observation. In medieval Europe, royal bedrooms were often public spaces. Servants entered regularly. Advisors came and went. Guards stood nearby. Nobles requested audiences. Political meetings happened inside personal chambers. In some royal courts, even getting dressed was a public event. French King Louis XIV famously transformed daily routines into ceremonies. Dozens of people could be present while he woke up, dressed, ate, and prepared for the day. The most powerful man in Europe could barely spend a few minutes alone. And this wasn't unusual. Throughout history, status often meant visibility. Privacy was not considered a right. It was considered isolation. And isolation was usually associated with exile, punishment, or danger. But if ancient sleeping arrangements seem strange, wait until you see what people considered a normal bathroom. Because this is where modern ideas of privacy completely fall apart.
Today, bathrooms are among the most private spaces in our lives. Doors lock. Walls separate people. Conversations stop. But in the ancient world, things were very different. In ancient Rome, public latrines were common. Rows of stone seats lined the walls. Sometimes dozens of people sat side by side. No dividers, no stalls, no privacy. Archaeologists believe people often socialized while using them. Business deals were discussed, conversations happened, news was exchanged. To modernize, it sounds uncomfortable. To Romans, it was normal, because privacy wasn't the default setting of human life. Community was. The same pattern appeared elsewhere. Public baths were common throughout many civilizations. Large groups washed together, talked together, relaxed together. The boundary between public and private life was much thinner than it is today. And for thousands of years, nobody thought much about it. Then something happened. The modern world began to emerge, and privacy started appearing everywhere.
Most people assume privacy has always existed. It hasn't. Historians argue that many forms of modern privacy only became common during the last few centuries. As cities expanded, homes changed. As wealth increased, rooms multiplied. For the first time, ordinary people began having separate bedrooms, separate offices, separate bathrooms, separate lives. Doors became more important. Locks became more common. Personal possessions increased. The Industrial Revolution accelerated everything. By the 19th and 20th centuries, privacy was becoming something people expected, rather than something only the wealthy occasionally experienced. Then came telephones, then personal cars, then computers, then smartphones. Today, a person can spend hours interacting with the world while physically sitting alone, something no human in prehistory could have imagined. For the first time in our species' history, complete solitude became available almost on demand. And at first, that sounds like progress. But there's a strange consequence. Humans evolved in a world where loneliness barely existed. Now we live in a world where it happens every day. And that raises a fascinating question. Are we actually built for this? The modern world gives us something our ancestors never had: control over our social lives. We choose when to talk. We choose when to leave. We choose when to close the door. And that's an incredible luxury. But it comes with a paradox. Researchers have repeatedly found that loneliness is becoming more common across many developed societies. At the exact moment privacy became easier than ever, feelings of isolation began rising. For almost all of human history, being alone was unusual. Today, it's normal. For most of human history, people woke up surrounded by others, worked surrounded by others, ate surrounded by others, slept surrounded by others. Now, a person can live alone, work remotely, order food online, watch entertainment alone, and go an entire day without speaking to another human being, something that would have been almost impossible for our ancestors. Which makes you wonder, maybe privacy isn't a natural human condition at all. Maybe it's one of the most successful inventions we've ever created. A technology so effective that we barely notice it. Walls, doors, bedrooms, headphones, passwords, screens, all tiny inventions that allow us to disappear from one another. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in a world where everyone knew everyone else's business. Then, in just a few centuries, we built a world where almost nobody does. And perhaps that's the strangest part. For almost all of human history, being alone meant danger. Today, it's comfort. We built walls to protect ourselves, doors to separate ourselves, and private lives that our ancestors would barely understand. But somewhere along the way, we created something entirely new. A world where a person can be surrounded by millions of people and still feel completely alone.